All right, PF1 video 4, and back we go. Yes, okay. So let's see. We have a lab to grade then, your Unix file system lab 2. Lab 1 you drew the little picture of and brought to class and showed me that on Wednesday then. And then over the weekend you were going to create all of the directories and then copy the files and so on to kind of duplicate that part of the little directory tree then underneath your Unix lab 2 Unix directory. And so we will, all right, grade that real quick. So let me become the administrator here. Okay. Unix 1 lab 2. And you can well imagine how boring it would be to for me to try to grade all of those labs. Certainly wouldn't do it here at the beginning of class, but even just on my own, to go to your directories and look around and so on, see what's there and whatnot, it'd be pretty boring. So anyway, it is absolutely the case. It's been my goal for decades now as a Unix programmer and Unix administrator to any boring, repetitive task, I'm going to write a darn script to do it, and then you can have the darn thing fire off in the middle of the night or on the weekends or whatever, and just remove that from your list of headaches that you deal with. And so I did just that a number of years ago, wrote this little shell script, and what a shell script is just a little text file that contains a bunch of commands. I could type them in on the command line, but instead I typed them into a file, and then I just feed that file to bash, our command interpreter then, and tell it to execute those commands then, instead of me having to type them in. And so it's a little program of sorts. And anyway, so let's see, I had to specify which group of students that I wanted to look at in terms of the list of usernames. That's you guys. And as luck would have it, in a class I teach, an online Unix class that's just about Unix, I teach that within the CIS department. I had to grade a lab, this exact same lab this morning, so I've already corrected the date there. That looks good. Oh, that's right. It's not 6 a.m. anymore, though. This morning's lab was due at 6. We'll make that 9 a.m. Okay, to match your start time then. And anyway, we kind of look through and see what it does here. And, you know, it's a bit of work to write the shell script. The whole shell script is 105 lines. If you printed it out, it'd be 2 pages, so not too big of a deal. Lots of white space in there. And, oh, well, it's kind of hit some high spots, including, hey, right here. So pretty quick, when you look at the results of me grading this lab, you're going to see this here inside a little text file. The text file, of course, readme.mc. You remember when you logged in here? And it says, hey, look for any labs that have been recently graded. So you're going to get in the habit of looking over here. Of course, I graded your lab 1 last week. But then it reminds you that in your lab directory, I'm going to create for you a file called readme with my initials on the end of it then. Okay? So anyway, here in my shell script, inside that file, you're going to see literally this little bit of text here. All right, I'm now looking for the directories, and I'll be darned, look at this here. Here it is. I did type it in one time. So this is the list of all of the directories that you had to create. So that's the list of all of them there. And so for each one of those, it's going to look to see if it found it or if it didn't find it. Okay, did it find it or didn't find it? It's going to print that out to your little text file. And if it didn't find it, it's going to take off some points. And then here we go. Next thing you're going to see in your little file, looking for files. And looky here. Here's the list of all of the files that you had to copy then into the various directories, including all the way down here in the dungeon, the secret message. Hey, speaking of that, did you guys actually take a look at the secret message then? Did curiosity? Okay, that was, I wasn't creative enough to write that funny little witticism, I guess, that was in there, but it was a cute little thing I remembered from, years ago. So the secret message with some words for living there, with some advice for living. So anyway, it looks for all of the files. And the other thing it does is it actually compares the original file with your copy of the file to make sure the contents were the same. And if the contents weren't the same, then it's going to print out another message. The contents of this file is not correct, and take off a point for that for any time that occurs then, for instance. So anyway, it's real picky, but I only had to go to the trouble of writing it once. And then at the end of the day, it's going to output all of this to your little file. And there's a little tweak I need to make down here at the bottom. Okay, we're going to go to there. That's exactly what we need right there, in fact. So that looks good. It's going to copy a little file out to your directory. And okay, that all looks good, This is good. I think we're ready to go. So what I want you guys to do right now is CD to your Unix Lab 2 directory. So under your home directory, then go to Unix, and then under that go to Lab 2. So you can CD down to that Unix Lab 2 directory. And when you look inside your Lab 2 directory, what do you see? Type ls or ls-l, one or the other. What's inside your Lab 2 directory? Just something called Unix, right? Y'all seeing that? Okay. So inside your Unix Lab 2, well, underneath that, there's another Unix. But stay in your Unix Lab 2 directory, because that's where I'm going to create this little README file. Well, that's where my shell script is going to create the little README file. So I want you to verify it's not there now, but after I run this program, ta-da! Anyway, it's going to grade all these labs in the blink of an eye. You might have noticed when I was looking at the this shell script here, at the very bottom, it actually has a statement that's going to cause it to wait 1 second in between each student. That way there, if something goes wrong, I can interrupt and fix it, and it won't have flown through the whole list of students or whatever doing something wrong. Instead, I'll stop it after the first student and repair what needs and so on. Not that it happens often, but just as a little safety measure there. So there'll be a 1 second delay between each student, but still pretty darn quick. So let's run that thing. Unix 1 lab2.sh. So you'll see your username go flipping by here then, and we'll let it work. Uh-oh. What the heck's going on there? Oh no, errors. Well, it's looking for the results. And why is that? Oops, because I forgot to comment out this line here. grep, we'll talk about this program at some point, certainly so later. It searches for a string inside of a file. And what it was looking for is looking for the word grade inside your README file. Well, there was no README file because I hadn't graded it just yet. So I create the README file, and then I come back and I have the shell script execute this command, which searches for the word grade, and then I can just then transfer that into my grade book then. So oops, there you go, that's a coding error on my part. I forgot to comment out this little line of code. Abort, we'll get rid of all those messages. Let's try this again. Hey, there we go, that looks like it should. So once you see your name get displayed here, then it has completed, it's finished grading your lab 2, your little Unix lab 2. So you can type, you know, ls minus L, for instance, there. Do you see your give me a thumbs up if you find a little README file there. Hey, very good. Okay. And oh, it's reminding me then to make sure I don't forget that I need to edit the message of the day file. So I'm going to do that real quick. And so we'll come over here and change this to Unix Lab 2. All right. So it created this file called readme.mcu. And so for now, you can cat it. And then you could use a little scroll bar on the side, you know, because it's going to be longer than one window. So you can do the scroll bar up and down, which work perfectly fine. And let me show you another little thing you could do. So for instance, I'm still in that same directory. If I cat that shell script, Unix 1 lab2.sh, I think that's what it is. Anyway, it's too big to fit on one screen, so you can use a little scroll bar. That works perfectly fine. Let me show you another little command. I guess we ought to type this into our notes. What the heck, we'll do just that. We've got plenty of time today. Today's compared to some, kind of a relaxed day where I don't have to go full throttle for 2 solid hours here. So let's go to our Unix commands. And, all right, more. To display output, output or a file, we'll say, or a file, one screen at a time. Okay. So we'll show you 2 ways that you can run the more program. Let's come back over, not to here, let's go back to the server here then. So what we could do, instead of cat, I could type more, Unix 1 lab2.sh. And now when I hit enter, it's going to, just like the cat command did, it's going to start reading from my file. You could do the exact same command, type more readme.mcu. Okay, so that would be your little file to demonstrate the more command on. But notice it's going to do something different. It displays the first screen full, and then it stops. So instead of it all going whizzing by, it just displays one screen full. If I hit the enter key, it advances 1 line at a time. If I hit the space bar, it advances 1 screen at a time. Okay, and then you can type Q for quit. So do put that in your notes, perhaps. Q for quit is a good way to get out of the more command. There we go. There's that. So in that case, we ran more by just running it as the program that we wanted to execute, and then told it to read from this file. There's an alternate way that we can do it, actually. I can go ahead and cat the same file, and then pipe the data to more. So the little vertical bar here on the Unix command line, this little vertical bar, it's the shift of the backslash up above the enter key. So we call that the pipe character, if you will. And kind of like I've got a tank that can contain fluids or whatever, and I want to connect it to another tank. Oh, I'm going to put a pipe between them, and then the water can flow from one tank to another, if you will, one container to another. Kind of similarly, this is a big part of what makes working on the Unix command line real flexible and so on. It has a whole bunch of little commands, and they can be linked together with these pipes. So what happens with this pipe? It takes the output of this command and connects it to this program over here with this pipe. So without piping it to more, we know how this is going to work. If I hit enter and I hadn't typed pipe to more, well, the entire file is going to go streaming by. But as soon as I take the output of my cat command and pipe it to more is going to read it from the pipe, if you will, and it's going to do the same thing like it did last time. It's going to display it one screen full at a time. So there's two different ways that the more command can work. It can read from a pipe, or it can read from a file. So we've given you examples of both of those then. All right. So anyway, take a look at your README file. Now, to be clear, I have not, sometimes before class, I'll come over here and I'll doctor this little shell script and I'll run it where it will just display what would be your README file without actually copying it to your directory. So in fact, just for the heck of it, I'll show you how that works. VI, and it's Unix1 lab2.sh. So what I can do is come down here, and instead of copying this file to this file O is what all of the output gets appended together in this little file called O. Instead of copying it out to your README file, instead I could just come in here and tell it to display that. So it doesn't create your README file, but it displays what would get copied to your README file, for instance. And so I can get a sneak peek at how you guys did and so on. But anyway, today I did not do that. All right, so I didn't do it, so I have no idea how you guys did. And for the record, if you completed the lab, but oops, you put it in the wrong place, it expects it under your home directory /Unix/lab2/Unix. And if you put it anywhere else, you can well imagine this shell script, it looks for it in one place, and if it ain't there, it is not going to find a lick of it. And if that's the case, your grade would be not too good then, right? So if you did complete the lab, but you either didn't get a README file because, in fact, you didn't even bother to create your Unix Lab 2 directory because you just misread the instructions, you started your work somewhere else or something. Or if you did create the Unix Lab 2, but maybe you started right there instead of creating that other Unix directory underneath Unix Lab 2. Then your directories A, B, and C, and your files F, G, H, and so on would all be in the wrong place, and it's not going to find anything where it expects it, and so on, and you get a very bad grade. If that was the case, send me an email just to let me know what happened before you fix anything. And then I'll look at it and verify, sure enough, you had it done. The modification times of everything shows that you had the work done by the due date and so on. And then I'll reply back and give you the thumbs up then to go ahead and fix it. And I'll regrade it and just take off a little bit of credit for you put it in the wrong place. But you did have it done. You just put it in the wrong place. And again, so even though the regrade would be after the deadline, well, it's special circumstances. You had the work done, but you just oopsed and put it in the wrong place. And for the record, that'll be the same thing on labs to follow. Now, I don't have PF2 and PF3 students putting their labs in the wrong place or anything else like that because they kind of learned the ropes, of course. But it's pretty common early on in PF1 for a student to complete a lab but put it in the wrong place, give it the wrong name or something. And since I use these shell scripts to help me grade things, it ain't going to find them. And so make a note, anytime that occurs, that you put your lab in the wrong location, but you do have it done, and then it doesn't get graded, and you see that there's no README file there, or the README file doesn't find your lab and gives you a big fat grade of 0 or whatever, you can look and see what happened. Oops, send me an email, and then I'll look at it and verify that, yep, sure enough, the student had it done. They just put it in the wrong place, and then I'll reply and tell you to fix it. But I'll ask if you would, don't fix it until I've given you the thumbs up so I can verify that you did have the work complete at the due date. All right, there's that. Let's see, what else? A little bit of housekeeping, I guess. One thing that I often mention by this point, but good heavens, with the goofy schedule we've had here the first 2 weeks, this is the third time we've met, and the third week, that's crazy. One thing I often talk about but didn't, there's a sign actually on the wall over there, another one on the cart, but I've not mentioned it yet, about no food or drink in the classroom. Anyway, that's the CIS department rules. And I've mentioned before, man, am I lucky that I am a guest of the CIS department. I get to office here in this business building which is quite a bit nicer than the math engineering building where the faculty are housed over there, you know. And then also I get to use their computer labs. This one here is just about exclusively mine, which is just wonderful. So I don't want to burn any bridges over here. And used to they had several full-time faculty and lots of part-time, several full-time staff and then some part-timers in also that were responsible for taking care of these labs. And then they got rid of them all. We've got a couple of them back, but anyway, still, I don't want to damage any equipment or anything else like that. So I'm going to follow their rules. It's not my rules, it's their rules of no food and drink. But at the same point, I don't want to be a hypocrite. And well, my old voice is scratchy enough as it is, and so I do bring a drink and various Coke bottles, but it's just water. But one thing, it is in a spill-proof bottle. So I'll tell you what, I want to give you the same abilities that I grant myself in the ability to have a drink here in class. But if you would, make sure it's in a spill-proof bottle, not a big gulp with a little flimsy lid put on top of it then. And so if that's what you got, oops, I'd ask if you would to leave it at the front. And just get in the habit of bring something with a screw-on lid and you'll be fine there then. All right, I guess that's it. So the content for today, hey, the good news is we're going to wrap up the development environment. And, good heavens, it took us part of 3 weeks. But that's the way it goes. But no matter what, whether we're using, Visual Studio or something else like that, or the Unix command line, no matter what, it takes you several lessons just to introduce all of the material necessary to learn the development environment. And so we picked, for the reasons I've gone over before, the old Unix command line. And but we're going to stick with it for PF1, 2, and 3. So anyway, it's time well invested, and we won't have to take time out of future classes then. All right, so we're going to show you how to use the text editor today. All right, so there we go. We don't need to be the admin anymore. And so the text editor, well, let's see here. We'll go to our notes real quick, and this is going to be video 4. We'll go ahead and put something down there at the end for today. All right. So we're going to learn the text editor. Oops, vid. My eye didn't take. So you saw me using it a couple of times here just today as I've been editing that little shell script before I ran it and so on. So you might have noticed this command that we hadn't covered yet. But well, now today's the day. And so the name of the program we're going to cover, I could put it up here in our quick reference, I guess. Oh, what the heck. The text editor that we're going to use is called, and again, it's called VI. I'm actually calling out the letters, if you will, versus trying to pronounce it as a word. It is the Unix/Linux text editor. I'll go ahead and put that here. And oh, what the heck. I'm not really going to type in a lot of rules or anything else today, but so we'll maybe just leave it at this. There are other editors, many other editors which are available for Unix, whether you're running Unix on the command line like we are, or if you're running an X Windows on top of that, a graphical interface, lots of different text editors. But this is the only text editor which ships with every Unix and Linux system on the planet. It is the only one, it's like the least common denominator, if you will, that you'll find on all systems. There's others that are available and that can be installed and so on, but this is the one and only that ships with every Unix and Linux system. And if you're going to claim to be, Unix, Linux literate, you need to learn this editor here, all right? Because some places, it might be that's all they have. Or maybe a slightly fancier version of that, which actually Linux has kind of an improved version of VI. In fact, well, oh, that's right. So with that in mind, I guess we'll come down here and type in a tiny bit here about VI. So VI, what the heck does VI even come from? And again, kind of like the ls command, and that might be worth mentioning in our notes now that I think about that. Let me go back up here, and you guys might want to do the same. Let's see, oh yeah, here we are. I'm going to put a note, pronounce, V, if you will, I. All right. I could have just said you pronounce the letters, if you will. All right. Kind of like maybe I'll just do pronounce the letters. We'll just do it that way. Pronounce the letters. If that makes sense. Hopefully that does. And the exact same thing, copy and paste, make a note of that. Same thing for the ls command. The ls command, you don't try to say it as a word. I did have exactly, in all the years I've been teaching, I had one student that came in, and he insisted that, nope, you're supposed to pronounce this as a word. I don't remember if he called it V or Vi or what the heck it was, but no. It and the ls command are kind of oddballs, and you pronounce those exclusively by calling out the letters. And anyway, it is what it is, so there's that. So VI, where does that come from? Well, I'll give you a little VI history, I guess. So why was it called VI? It was, you know, an early, if you will, visual editor. What the heck does that even mean? Especially for my students that might have played around a little bit with Visual Studio. Good heavens, Visual Studio is a wonderful development environment. It has an editor and a debugger, and it will go ahead and give you some hints about syntax errors and so on as you're typing things in, and do autocompletes and all kinds of wonderful stuff. And so you can edit and compile and execute your program and debug them all in one environment. It's really a nice tool. Anyway, they call it Visual Studio. Anyway, of course, that was a Microsoft product that came out in the 90s. And, oh, so VI, that means if it's called VI because it is, quote, visual, is that kind of sort of like Visual Studio? Well, no, not really. This is a long time, much earlier than that. And a piece of trivia is it was created by a guy named Bill Joy in the mid-'70s. So Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie, late 60s, early 70s. We've seen that picture there then, right? So anyway, the earliest then terminals came around, you know, the CRTs, if you will, to replace those paper consoles in about the mid-'70s. Anyway, so Bill Joy wrote this editor here. And anyway, the nice thing about it is it actually allowed you to, oh my goodness, edit your file, and it brings it up and displays a screen full of it. And it had a cursor that you could move up and down. Had a cursor that you can move up and down instead of just having to give a command to the editor to delete this line or insert this line or to display these lines or whatever. That's one thing for you to think about when we look at this old famous picture here. These guys were programmers. They're writing programs. But this was their interface, this paper console. How do you edit a file when all you have is a printer that prints things out one line at a time? They had to edit files. They're programmers. So anyway, so imagine you've got a file in your file system there, and so you just have to type commands into an editor. So you would say, display lines 10 to 30, and it would print them off, and it would number them also. Over to the left-hand side, it would number them. And then you would say, delete line number 13, and it would delete it. And then if you said print 10 to 30, you'd print it again, and the old line 13 is gone. Okay, that kind of makes sense. And then you could say, I want to do an insert at line 16. And then the cursor on the printer would sit there, and anyway, you'd type something in enter, and then it would insert it into the file. You wouldn't see that until you printed that line range again or whatever. So, you know, you can imagine, anyway, they had to work in this environment. There are a number of editors back in early DOS and Unix and so on. And just for fun, I actually wrote one. Gosh, I should have thought about practicing up on that darn thing before I came to class, actually. I have an early version of an editor called Edline, which kind of emulates that, which I wrote on my own just for fun. Maybe I'll demonstrate that, at a future point, I guess, then. Anyway, that's what they had. But ta-da, finally, when they got rid of the paper consoles, or well, actually the paper consoles stuck around for quite some time, but when the early CRTs, the early monitors came in, then it allowed for, a cursor. Display part of the file, let me move my cursor up and down, and now I can start typing new stuff here, or hitting the delete key there, or whatever, and so on. And so in that regard, that's why they called it visual. Previous to that, the editors that old Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie were using in that picture with the paper console, they were called line editors. Line editors. Why'd they call them line editors? Because everything was with respect to a line number. Display these lines. Delete those lines. Insert at this line number. So everything was, you're giving commands to the editor in terms of line numbers. But once VI came around, it was said to be a screen editor instead of a line editor. So, you know, Microsoft Word, of course, is a kind of fancy. It's a word processor. A word processor is kind of a complicated beast. You guys ever worked just with lowly old Notepad on Windows? So Notepad, hey, just kind of sort of behaves like a super duper stripped down version of Word. You can type in text, but your formatting options are very limited. You just type in some text, save the file, kind of there you go. And anyway, so ultimately a text editor is very, very similar to Notepad. In fact, a true text editor, there's no such thing as changing fonts or borders or margins, I should say, and font sizes and all the rest of that stuff. No. here's some text, I edit the text, I save the text, and anyway, it's just very, very plain, you know, without all the bells and whistles and so on. Anyway, that's what we're using to write programs and so on, is a text editor, and VI is also then a screen editor, but we're not using a word processor. Hey, the good news is we're no longer using a line editor either. And in fact, maybe if I think about it, if we take a break partway through, on break, I'll review myself real quick and I'll show you how a line editor works, just for grins, I guess. All right, so we're using VI. Oh, and in fact, so the specific editor that we're running on our Linux system, we invoke it with just VI. We just type in VI and poof, it runs this program. But the program actually is a fancier version of VI. And its product name is actually Vim, but you don't have to type Vim, you can just type VI. They kind of alias where it works just fine as VI. But what does Vim stand for? So Vim is VI improved, if you will. So Vim is equal to VI quote improved. So the M is where the M came from. Improved. I'll get this right. There we go. So it has some extra features that VI doesn't. So VI is kind of very, very basic. You know, guaranteed system administrators, boy, they need to learn VI because it's kind of just a very, very basic fundamental editor. And when the network is down and the system is down and you're working just sitting at a console doing some system administration stuff and it's just you, guaranteed if you need to edit a configuration file or something like that, you're probably using VI. So anyway, we're running a version called Vim. And kind of a funny little, oh, I don't know, tradition, I guess, is when people come up with, over the many, many years, of course, again, how many years have been since 1975? So that's about 50, yeah, about 50 years. And so in all of the years that VI has been around, other people have written new and improved versions of VI. In fact, I've written a version of VI on my own, just kind of for the programming exercise, I guess, that I have installed on our system also. But many others are doing the same thing and give it extra capabilities and whatnot. And the tradition is, if you create your own version of VI, somewhere in the name of the program that you come up with, it has to have the letters VI in sequence. All right, and so like Vim has VI in the name. And so I one time did a Google or something and found all of the different names of VI follow-ons, if you will. And anyway, an awful lot of them then have followed the little unofficial rule that says you should have VI in the name. And the greatest name of all of the versions of VI that I saw is there's a version of VI called Elvis. Okay, which does have VI in the middle of it. Anyway, so some creative programmer then created an editor called Elvis, which is an improved version of VI, if you will. All right, so we're going to learn VI because, once again, it is the one and only text editor that is going to be available on all versions of Unix and Linux around the globe. Now, to understand how VI works, we need to go back to, let's see, we'll go to either one of these be fine. Okay, let's look at this picture here. So one thing to recognize, so when Bill Joy created VI in 1975, well, the keyboards look basically similar to this. And of course, you can't see any details there. Anyway, at some point, I did a Google search for a vintage keyboard, and I found this one here, which isn't perfect. In fact, what I might do is open it with paint here real quick. Come on, give me, there we go. So here's an early, all right, so we need to change where's my zoom scale here? So usually it's down at the bottom. I don't think that's either one of these. Well, we can do this. I'm trying to remember. View, zoom out. Zoom out. Control page down. Fine. Okay, so control page down. Okay, there you go. So here's an early keyboard. It's not actually early enough, but anyway, when I Googled vintage keyboard, here's one of a number I found. And this isn't too bad. But, well, when we compare this keyboard to the one that Ken and Dennis were sitting in front of, well, we need to do this. See the number pad over here on the side? Okay. Bye-bye. All right, so we're going to get rid of him. So there, that's better then. So now we can do control page up where you can see a little better. Hey. Is that working? There we go. So now we're kind of left with this. And so this is closer to the keyboard that Ken and Dennis were sitting in front of. Oh, yeah, one other exception, though. Well, Really, these keys over here, it's kind of a funny arrangement of those arrow keys, isn't it? You know, that's not very friendly, having the up arrow and the up and down over here to the right of the left and right. But anyway, I guess really we should get rid of that and get rid of this over here also. So now we're getting closer to what the keyboards that Bill Joy and Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie and so on were sitting in front of. This is kind of what they had. It basically was kind of the same keys you have on a typewriter. All right. So imagine this is your keyboard and you don't have a mouse and you're trying to edit a file. How in the heck are you going to edit a file if you don't have any arrow keys? I don't have a page up, a page down, a home, an end, a delete. All right. How in the heck are you going to do that? Well, the editor then in software then has to allow for the limited hardware that was available back in the day. And so we had to come up with an editor where you could type in commands to the editor using the keys that you got, and then you could kind of switch gears into using the keys just as like you would on a typewriter or a notepad or something else like that, where you just type things into your file. And as a result of that, the lack of keys on those old keyboards, the VI editor is said to be a dual mode editor. Okay, and you know that's right. Gosh, a lot of times I bring a little handout. I didn't today. It's fine. We'll just go ahead and pull it up on the web. So let's see here. So I'm going to go to here. All right, and all right. So you guys kind of do the same thing. I'm going to go to my home directory on the web, and then after tilde usenik, you guys have been here before. All right. So cs.actx.edu/tilde my last name /vi.html. And we get here. And we get here. Okay. So this is a little quick reference on VI. And again, you print it out. In fact, that's right. I created this specifically so that when you print it out, it fits on one page of paper. Just barely. So it fits on one page of paper. And it's kind of nice to actually to print it out. I sometimes do that and sometimes don't. But then also you can type in additional commands over here. So do put an area in your notes at least where we can type in some extra VI commands that aren't on this sheet. But here's your quick reference on how to use the VI editor. All right. So we're going to keep our little notes over here then, our little cheat sheet. And then we're going to come to the old Unix command line. We're going to practice today. We're going to spend the whole day then just talking about the text editor. And all right, so first thing, to run VI, well, we enter the command VI. Now to be clear here, this is a path to a file. Now, it can be a relative path. It can be a full path. You know, I can stay where I am. You know, like right here, you've seen me before. VI, etc, message of the day, to edit that message of the day file, to update what labs have been graded and so on. You know, so you can supply a full path, and VI will open it perfectly fine. Or, you know, it could be a relative path just to make it real nice and easy. And for the most part, you guys are going to use just a relative path and edit files that are right there in your current working directory. And you guys know the drill here. So if on a little usage information, anything that's expressed in all uppercase letters, that means you need to replace that with an actual file name. Now you could create a file called uppercase FILENAME, but assuming that's not what you want to do, replace file name with the file name of your choice. And then once we do that, if it exists, it's just going to be opened in the editor. If it doesn't exist, then a new file will be created. So how about we VI my first file. Okay, my first file. Now, do we need to put a .text on the end of that, for instance? We don't. Let me ask you a question. You know, you guys are in the habit, you know, working on Windows, for instance, of having .txt, .doc, JPEG, or whatever it happens to be. Why do we have those extensions at the end of file names, like on Windows? I know you know the answer. It's going to be one of those where once I tell you, you'll say, oh, yeah, that makes sense, of course. But anyway, in Windows, files tend to have an extension on the end because, well, in a graphical environment, you're going to navigate to where some file is, and then what are you going to do? Click, click. You're going to double click on it. And when you double click on it, it needs to run some program to do something with the thing you just clicked on. If you click on a .doc file, then it's going to launch Word and read that file into Microsoft Word. If you double click on a .txt file, it's going to launch Notepad and then read that file into Notepad. If you click on an MP3, it's going to launch some music player and so on. And you know, you guys of course know that you can go ahead and change, hey, I want to change the default web browser, change the default music player, change the default image viewer or whatever. Anyway, so you have those default rules built into the system, and then when you double click a file, depending on what that extension is, it launches the appropriate program of choice. But while working on the command line, well, it doesn't really apply, because if I want to examine a text file, if I just want to display it, I'll explicitly run the cat program and supply the name of the file as a command line parameter. So cat gets run because I typed in cat. But if I wanted to edit that file, then I would type VI and then the file name, and VI gets run because I typed in VI. So we're making that association. This is the program I want to run, and this is the data file that I want to read in, and we type both of them on the command line. Whereas in a graphical environment, you're just double-clicking on the file that you want to be handled somehow, and you have to use the extension on the end and then those rules. So anyway, we don't have to put .txt or anything else on the end. Sometimes we do, and sometimes compilers or whatever might prefer it and so on, but an awful lot of times you can kind of do without if you want, and we're going to do just that here. It's a text file, but we don't have to put .text on the end. And so when I hit enter here, VI is going to launch. My first file is the command line parameter I'm supplying. So then VI is going to look in my current directory. That's a relative path. So it's going to look in my current directory, my first file, well, it doesn't see it there. Okay, I guess I'll create a new one. So it does just that. So it creates a brand new file, tells us down here, here's the file name, and it even tells us down here on the bottom, that's a new file. All right. And so this is kind of a goofy thing. What are these little tildes over here on the left-hand side? It's kind of strange, but it kind of makes sense, I guess, a little bit. You know, social media and so on is kind of, for the most part, removed what we did for a while many, many years ago, and was kind of an alternative to social media where we would just forward email to each other. You know, someone comes up with a funny email message somehow, and you forward it to your friends, and they forward it to their friends, and pretty soon the darn email message is a mile long with all of the forwards, you know, tacked onto the top of it and so on, you know. And anyway, back in the day when you got some email message that had some funny thing in it or whatever, and you scroll down to the bottom to actually get to the message itself, what would happen is you're scrolling down, the message is scrolling up, right? As you're arrowing down, I should say. As you're arrowing down, the message is scrolling up, you know, through your window there, if you will. And every once in a while it'd be the case that at the bottom of the message, for some mysterious reason, it seemed to often be the case like in emails, that there was just a whole bunch of blank lines at the end of the file. And the question is, how do you see a blank line? There's no characters on it. There's no visible characters on a blank line. So how do you see those blank lines at the end of the file? Well, you don't really you don't directly see them, but all of the other lines in the file move up to the top of your window and disappear, and then you're just left with a blank screen, and then being the smart person you are, you recognize, oh, I guess there's a whole bunch of blank lines at the end of the file for some weird reason. And so you have to just kind of detect their presence through other means. Anyway, when they created VI, to show that there is absolutely nothing on these lines, not even a, quote, blank line, they put these little tildes here. The little tildes are not part of the file. They're just an indication. This line is really, truly empty. There is nothing here, no blank lines, no non-printable characters of any kind. There is nothing here at all. It's a brand new file. So anyway, that's what those tildes are. They disappear as we type stuff into our file. Back to our cheat notes then. All right. In VI, there are two operating modes. VI is said to be a dual mode editor. A dual mode editor has these two modes. In command mode, we're going to type in commands. We're going to tell the editor we want to delete something, we want to insert something, we want to search and replace for something, we want to move the cursor around different things and so on. And then in insert mode, we could put an alias for that over to the side. That's kind of notepad mode, if you will. Now, notepad is used to run on a modern computer that has arrow keys and page up and page down and insert and delete and all the rest of that stuff. So we don't need to use this command mode for Notepad. So Notepad is kind of similar to VI, but Notepad, you're just always in insert mode, if you will. Okay, you don't need this command mode. And anyway, but command mode for issuing commands. And you know, so now we have keyboards that do have arrow keys and do have home and insert and delete and page up and down, all the rest of that stuff. Well, do they work in VI? Of course, absolutely they do. They absolutely do. But the old ones, we kind of grandfathered those in, if you will. The old commands also work. And it's kind of a neat thing, Now, I asked you this before, kind of ask again. Do you guys like shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts, Control-C, Control-V, Control-X, those kind of things? If you like keyboard shortcuts, because it can save you grabbing a mouse and right-clicking and doing different things like that and so on, hey, you're going to like VI. Because once you learn all the commands, see, the thing is, VI will work with just these keys. For historical reasons, VI will do absolutely everything. Search and replace and page up and page down and moving the cursor around and all that stuff. Even though you don't have any of those special keys, there's shortcuts that just use these keys. And they have just preserved those all these years later, even though the keyboards have gotten better. And the truth is, I use an awful lot of shortcuts, and it makes me a faster editor because I don't have to move my hands off of the home row. All right, and you'll see I'm not an especially fast typist, and good heavens, I make lots of typo errors these days, but I'm a pretty fast editor, even though I'm not a fast typer, because I know all these shortcuts. All right, but if you're a shortcut kind of person, you'll eventually learn to like VI then. And now with graphical, if you're working in a graphical environment with VI, you can use a mouse, but the honest truth is, I find using a mouse not necessarily, kind of depending on the nature of the changes I'm making, not necessarily that helpful because it's an extraneous movement. I have to take my hands off the home row, look at the mouse, grab the mouse, look at the screen, do my highlighting and so on, and then get my hands back and start typing again afterwards. But you can do absolutely everything just on these lowly keys here. Okay, well, let's jump in here then and start learning VI. You know what we might do now that I think about it? Gosh, it takes a while to kind of get started here, and we're gonna just go through these first commands by our break. Maybe I'll run upstairs and grab some print-offs or print off some more real quick, and I'll bring you this in printed form, and then you can make updates to it as we go on, because all of the extra commands for the most part that we're going to show you that aren't written here will cover the second half of this class, if you will. So let's jump in here then. Okay. Oh yeah, so one thing. So if you're in insert mode, we'll show you how to get in insert mode in just a minute here, but if you are in insert mode, ta-da! The escape key moves you from insert mode back to command mode. All right, so the escape key is kind of important. And hey, you can make a note again. Gosh, this is one little thing that we could write on the printed out version of this, which I will bring you after our break. But as an alternative, what if your keyboard way back in the day didn't even have an escape key? I don't remember, does this one have an escape key? It doesn't. Oh no, we're really in bad trouble. Well, the other option is Control-C. So make a little note, Control-C is an alternative to escape within VI. It's not going to blow you out of VI like it sometimes does. Instead, it will just serve the same thing as escape, and it will put you back into command mode. So here's a number of commands. We'll go over a handful of these here before our break. All right, so here we go. So we have gone into VI, haven't typed a single command, haven't really touched the keyboard since then. So it kind of makes sense. Our first VI command, which I'll type here in just a second, is I for insert. Now, one thing interesting about using PuTTY. Now remember, PuTTY is not Unix. PuTTY is not Unix. PuTTY is a little program that we use to send characters to the server, and then the server sends information back on what to be displayed on our screen. And the interesting thing is, I know that for a number of years that my understanding of how Unix worked was I just assumed that I typed a command and that then when I hit enter that the command was sent to the server and then the server sent back the answer. That's actually not what happens. So if I type who and then hit enter, again, and it'd be easy to assume that I type WHO and then when I hit the enter key, it sends the command who to the server and the server sends the result back. That's actually not what happens. What actually happens is when I'm typing the command who, I type W. The W is sent to the server sends back a command that tells my PuTTY terminal to display the W right there where my cursor was, and then move the cursor over. And then I type H, and the H goes to the server, and the server sends back a command telling it to display the H, and then move the cursor over one to the right. And then the same thing with the O. Okay, so hey, now we've got WHO displayed, and then when I hit the enter key is sent to the server, and then, the server says, I guess he's done composing this command line now, and then it executes the who command and sends the results back. So wow, when you're typing commands, those commands are actually being sent to the server, not all together, but one agonizing character at a time. So PuTTY and Unix, command line Unix, you generate a fair amount of very, very small network data packets, just one character at a time. It's still very, very low bandwidth overall, you know, but it's kind of weird. There's, one character at a time. And we can kind of see that right here. Because the interesting thing is, I'm going to type an I, but the I is not going to be displayed on the screen like you would expect, like it normally would if I was just at the command line. I typed I as part of typing in some command. When I type I here, the I will be sent to the server, and then the server is going to respond, and look what happens. So I'm going to type I. All right. The I didn't pop up where my cursor is. Hey, look down at the bottom. Hey, that Vim, our current version of VI, when you go into insert mode, hey, that bottom line is often just kind of a status line there, if you will. And so anyway, I typed I, and then the word insert is displayed at the bottom there in bold. The blue, purple, whatever their color is the bold font that my terminal supports. So it says insert mode, just to let me know, hey, now you're in insert mode. And now if I type another I, ta-da, I typed two I's. The first I put me into insert mode. The next I, now that I'm in insert mode, again, now we're kind of like in Notepad. So if you use Notepad, I just type away and get over here to the right-hand side. I'll hit Enter to bring the cursor back to the beginning. So let's just type some stuff. Now to be clear, okay, so I'm going to type all kinds of random junk up here today, and there is no need at all for you to necessarily make your file look exactly like mine. You know, if we're working on a program, probably so. Typing in some crap into VI just to display how it works, absolutely not. So don't stress trying to keep up with my typing or whatever, you know. But all right, I am very excited to be learning the VI text editor. All right, and it is nice that we are finally able to have class on a Monday. All right, another exclamation point for excitement there. So we're just typing in some stuff. When the cursor gets over towards the right-hand side, we're going to hit Enter to bring it back. Now, will it kind of wrap around, if you will? It will. Let's just type a really long line. In fact, just for the heck of it, I'm just going to type in some junk. All right, let me get here where you can, it's all in the video. So if I type and type and type, eventually it kind of wraps around. I'll hit Enter here. Now, but to be clear, this is actually just one line. It's that VI, you know, and Notepad will do the same thing. There's an option in Notepad. If I type a really, really, really long line, do you just want to go ahead and move the window over where I can kind of continue to see what I'm typing, or do we want to wrap it around? And you can kind of choose. Now, to be clear here, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit Escape to get into command mode. Notice that the word insert disappeared down here. And when I move my cursor up with the arrow key, I'm going to move the cursor up to here. When I move it up again, look where it goes. So from the first of this line to the first of the next line. So in that one long line, it's displayed on two rows of text there, if you will, on my terminal, but it is still literally one line of text. In fact, check this out. If I make my screen bigger, there you go, sure enough, it's just a single line. But if you make your screen too short, then it has to kind of wrap it around just so you can kind of see it all. But anyway, so there's that. I guess we'll leave that big line of junk there for now until we show you how to delete lines. I'm going to go back in insert mode, and let's do the following here. Yes, kind of getting ready for the next. Okay, let's see here. What do I want to type? It is a nice sunny day today. Enter. All right. So I wrote a sentence of sorts there on line number, whatever that is, 5 or 6 or something like that. I wrote a sentence, but oops, if the English faculty members come in here, they would remind me that I need a piece of punctuation at the end. And so this is kind of a common mistake that you can make when you're writing a Java program. We're going to be using the Java programming language here in PF1. And in Java, a statement should be terminated with a semicolon. Kind of sort of like, well, in English, a sentence should be terminated with a piece of punctuation like a period or an exclamation point or something else like that. So this will happen very often. I'm going to go into command mode, put my cursor up here at the top, where you will type in a program and you'll forget, because you're not in the habit of doing so, you'll forget to type a semicolon. And if you do that, then when you feed your program to the compiler and it's going to check the syntax of the darn thing, it's going to say, hey, you're missing a semicolon on line 6 or whatever it is, and you need to fix that. So, all right, so let's, in fact, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to cheat here. Now, this nice version of VI we're running, notice over here it tells you what line number you're on and what column number you're on, where your cursor is horizontally. So line 7, I'm in the cursor position, or excuse me, a character position number 1, and as I move to the right, we can see I'm at 7, 7, 7, 8, 7, 9, and so on. So anyway, that's line 7. So if this was a program, and I forgot my semicolon at the end of a statement on line 7, it would tell me that I have a syntax error there. We'll show you how to do this in a little bit, but I'm going to jump to line 7. All right, I'm going to jump to line 7, colon 7 here. Boom, I'm on line 7, and now I need to go to the end to put my semicolon, or in this case, a period there. So if I was in Notepad, well, I could click the mouse there, or I could just arrow over to the end of the sentence, to the end of the statement, and fix that. But check this out. Just again, to save you a little bit of time, some keystrokes. If I'm on the correct line number, all of these are ways to go into insert mode. So I will put you in insert mode at the cursor location, but there's another version of going into insert mode, A, for, if you will, after, or at the end of, all right? So capital A will put you into insert mode at, A for at, if you will, the end of the current line. And compared to arrow, 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 or just holding it down or whatever, just a little bit of a time saver here. So I'm on line 7, capital A moves my cursor to the end and puts me into insert mode. So I can type my period or whatever there and keep going because I'm just in insert mode. All right. So that's kind of a handy way to get into insert mode at the end, or after, if you will, a line. But we also have lowercase o and uppercase O. All right, so what the heck are those? Well, next line, previous line, whatever, Okay, so tell you what let's do here. I'm going to put my cursor on one of these lines here somewhere in the middle. Notice that my cursor is in the middle of this line. And again, just think about Notepad. If in Notepad, if I wanted to insert a brand new line right here, I wanted to save the blank line, but I want to insert a brand new line there. Well, I could arrow to the end of the line, then hit an insert key, and then type my new line if I want. But hey, there we go. Over here, lowercase o. Lowercase o will put you in insert mode at the beginning of a new line below where we are right now. So my cursor is just in the middle of the line. One keystroke, pow! I'm in insert mode on the beginning of a brand new line right below where my cursor was previously. This is a new line. Okay. Similarly, and this will happen sometimes, you'll need to do insert a new line up above a given line, like this kind of the worst case scenario here. I need to insert a brand new line above the first line. So you guys know how that would work in Notepad. You'd have to put your cursor at the beginning, then hit enter, and then hit up arrow, right? But again, we can save some keystrokes here if we have these commands memorized. So if I want to insert above where my cursor currently is, it's capital O. So I type Shift O, and this is a new line 1. There you go. And we can just hit enter and keep more stuff here. All right, works just fine. Okay, so there's 4 different ways to go into insert mode, kind of depending on where you need to go in insert mode at, at the current cursor position, the end of the line, or above or below the current line. All right, let's talk about deleting. Once again, the old keyboard, hey, maybe it had a backspace key, and it actually, or maybe not, probably had backspace, but likely the earlier keyboards didn't have a delete key. And there's a subtle difference between backspace and delete, and they both work with our keyboards here. Backspace moves the cursor to your left and eats characters on the left of your cursor, if you will. Delete keeps the cursor where it is, moves the line to the right over, deleting the current character, if you will. And anyway, they both work fine here. But if this was your keyboard, well, instead of using a backspace key or a delete key, and honest truth is, I never use backspace or delete when I'm in VI. Instead, X. All right? You need to be in command mode. That's the only thing. So you're in the habit of hitting the old escape key regularly. And to be clear, this is in our cheat note. The escape key moves you from insert mode to command mode, but it's not a toggle. It's not like you hit it once and you're in command mode, you hit it again, then you're back in insert mode. No, if you hit the escape key once or twice or 10 times, well, you're just still in command mode. So make sure, so I hit the escape key regularly, and then just put your cursor wherever. I think this is a good spot here. Get rid of some of this junk. X, 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 X. The cursor stays in the same place. It eats the current character, and the data to the right, the text to the right, just keeps shifting over then. So there's that. Oh, hey, this is a good line to practice the next command on then. So X to delete a character at the current cursor location. And here's our first of a number of 2 character commands to delete a line, DD. And it's not like a mouse click that you have to click both times within a half a second or something like that. You know, to be clear, you can hit a D, go to lunch and come back and hit the next D, pow, and it's gone. Okay, so DD. So there's that, doing just fine on time. And tell you what, let's do just for grins, I guess. Let's take a 5-minute break. That normally we try to squeeze it down to maybe 3 or 4. Give me 5, I guess. I'm going to run upstairs and I'm going to print out some of these, and we'll hand those out after I get back then. And if I also have a minute of time, maybe I'll look at that old Edline editor, see if I can give you a demo of that real quick then also. But let's take 5 minutes. We are back after our break, and anyway, boy, it sure is nice once again to have my office right here in the same building where I'm teaching. I have taught this class a fair amount in the math engineering building and computer labs ahead over there, and of course plenty of math classes I taught there and other buildings on campus, and boy, it sure is nice to be all under one roof and be able to pop up real quick to get something if you need it. So there you go. So you might hole punch that or whatever and stick it with your notes. And the good news is now you can add extra little commands by writing them on your little VI reference sheet that you can hang on to then there. And I think so far the only one that we've mentioned is, oh yeah, Control-C is the same thing as escape. So you might kind of add that to your list. Let's just resume where we left off then. Okay, so just like in Windows, you have a clipboard, the clipboard in Windows. In VI, you have a delete buffer. You have a delete buffer. So tell you what I'm going to do here. Let's say I wanted to take, we'll take this long line here, and I'm going to want to move it to the bottom of the file, for instance. Well, I can D, that deleted it, move my cursor down, and then, oh yeah, so we're showing you how to paste here then. P for paste. So here my cheat sheet over here, lowercase p for paste. And anyway, with P, it will paste it to the line below the current line. So my cursor, well, I'll tell you what, I'll put my cursor here, just to make it clear. And my cursor can be anywhere on this line. And now P for paste, and it pastes it to the line below. And it still is in my delete buffer, so I can go up top here somewhere and P for paste, and somewhere else and P for paste, and so on. Works just fine. And oh, what the heck, while we're doing this, hey, now this is hard to tell with this printout here, but we ought to be clear, this is a lowercase p, and this is an uppercase p. They look pretty close to the same thing, but you'll have to maybe add that to your notes or remember or whatever. Kind of like lowercase o and uppercase o. Those look more different, but the lowercase p, uppercase p, it's a very subtle difference there at all. I think the uppercase is kind of flatter on the top. It's about the only difference. The lowercase p has 1 pixel missing there to the right of the little stem. But anyway, so uppercase p will paste above. So if you move the cursor to the first line, for instance, and that same line is still in my delete buffer, uppercase P will paste it above the current line. Once again, yeah, don't at all worry about making your file look exactly like mine. So that all looks good. So now we know how to cut and paste. What about to copy and paste? All right, let's just copy and paste a different line. Well, we'll just do the more stuff here line, kind of a short one in this case. So kind of strange, you know, but anyway, I have to ask Bill Joy the reasoning for this, kind of a cute little thing, I guess. But instead of DD, which would delete a line, you use YY to yank a line, if you will, into your delete buffer. But it copies instead of deletes. So if you wanted to just copy a line somewhere else, well, instead of deleting it, you would just instead yank it in your delete buffer. So again, kind of like DD, YY, there's no timing involved. There's one Y, there's another Y. So now it's in my delete buffer. And I can arrow down and P for paste and go somewhere else and P for paste. Once again, up to the top, capital P will paste it up above the first line and so on. So there's copy and paste. But what if you want to copy more than one line? Well, that's going to be covered somewhere in here. Yeah, here we go. All right. So you can use a multiplier. I don't use it often on X, to delete multiple characters. I'll use it more on DD and YY. So it gives you a little example. To delete 3 lines, well, it's just 3DD, and it will delete those 3 lines. So let's just go in our file, pick some random spot. we'll just do that very thing. Oops, let's see here. So put my cursor here, and for instance, if I do a 3, D, D, pow, those 3 lines are gone. It even tells you down the bottom, 3 fewer lines. I can arrow down somewhere else, P for paste, you know, and again up to the top, capital P for paste, and it's pasting those 3 lines then, all right? So I use that a lot, you know, gosh, when we're programming and so on. Oh, I want to move this code somewhere else, so I'll count lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 DD, go somewhere else, P for paste, boom, and it's done, all right? So there's copy and paste and cut and paste. Oh yeah, the funny thing about yank, this is a Vim original. So check this out. This is kind of, again, cute, I guess. So I put my cursor here, and if I type YY, I'm on that learning line there, and P for paste, sure enough, okay, I copied that 1 line. That worked fine. If I do a 2YY, now it's going to be learning and finally, or 2 words on those 2 lines. So now if I come down here and P for paste, I get learning and finally, yep, sure enough. But the funny thing is, with Vim, and now you know I'm not making it up, YY stands for yank. If I put my cursor here, and if I type 3YY, look at the bottom. 3 lines yanked. You thought I made that up, but it doesn't tell you 1 line yanked or 2 line yanked, but 3 or more. It actually gives you a little visual feedback there. 3 lines have been yanked. In other words, they've been copied into your delete buffer. So that's kind of bizarre. But anyway, we'd have to ask whoever created Vim, and I don't know who that was. That's a much more recent thing. All right, let's see. So we're doing pretty good. We can move around and insert various ways, and we can delete characters. We can delete lines. And let's see here. Let's see. Oh, here's another one that's a good one to show you. Here's kind of a good one. So this is not on your sheets. You can write it in. So learning delete commands. What if I wanted to, now grammatically this certainly doesn't make any sense, but what if we wanted to, oh, I don't know, chop off the end of the current sentence or the current line of text that I'm on? It's nice that we're finally able to have class. We'll tell you what, we'll just do it that way. Finally able to have class. Okay. If I wanted to get rid of on a Monday, well, I could type X, 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 you know, to get rid of each letter there. Again, this is not on your cheat sheet, so be prepared to write this one down. So check this out. Make sure you're in command mode. Capital D. The rest of that line is gone. Okay, capital D will delete the character under the cursor and all of the characters to the right. It deletes to the end of the line, starting at the cursor position. So that can be kind of handy. So add that somewhere up here with X and DD. Capital D, delete to the end of the current line. That's a good one. All right, I think we're done with this first part here. I think we're ready for change a word. I'll tell you what, let's do here just for the heck of it. These sentences are fine, just we have plenty of time. Let's type in traditional little sentences that we would type in. Back in my day, I actually, funny, when I was in high school, gosh, this is a long, long time ago, when I was in high school at Tascosa, I actually took a, quote, I think it was called data processing course. That's going to use a computer. Oh man, the space age has arrived in the Houston household. Junior is going to take a computer class. And anyway, I signed up for it, and I quickly realized, like in no time at all, this is not a particularly interesting class. They didn't even have a computer. They had a card punch machine. This goes way back. They had a card punch machine. And then you could type your programs on cards, and then send your program downtown to where they actually had a computer somewhere to compile and run your program. So I realized, that's not so good. I mean, this is way, way long ago. So after I think a week, in fact, the funny piece of trivia, this was at Tascosa High, and we had this card punch machine, and we were the only ones in the city that did, the only high school in the city that did. So kids were coming in from Amarillo High, believe it or not, and other schools, you know, to use our card punch machine at Tascosa. So I literally remember that for the 1 or 2 days I sat in that class, that me and all my stupid friends, what did we do? We played around the card punch machine, typing out cards that said things like, you know, Amarillo High blows, you know, and then we print it off and we pass it down to the Amarillo High students or whatever to gig them, you know, and we were just being, you know, idiot students like students will be. But I quickly realized it would help if I knew how to type, which I didn't, all right. So I dropped that class, and then I signed up for a typing class, all right. Now, I guess these days they don't call it typing, or do they still call it typing anyway? We still use that term at various times, but I think the class has been renamed. This seems kind of boring, but what do y'all call the class when you learn typing? Oh, well, good. Okay, Zach. So sometimes it's still called typing. That's good. Isn't that funny? You learn to type, but I'm guessing many of you have never actually put your hands on an actual typewriter, you know, but you learn to type. For whatever reason, a lot of schools, they might call it keyboarding. I don't know. It seems kind of lame, but anyway, keyboarding class. But where was I going with that? Oh, no. Oh, yeah, it's to search and... Oh, that's right. And then, so when I took typing class, there we go. I finally connected the dots again. Too long of a detour. So when I took typing class, we practiced by typing some little sentences such as, oh, yes, the quick brown fox jumps over the what? Oh, good for you guys. All right. So it's funny. I hadn't typed that silly sentence since I took typing class all those years ago. And then at some point when I was teaching VI as a teacher, all decades later then, and I typed this sentence in, but I just misremembered it, and I think I did jumped. All right. And then I announced to the students, hey, what is the significance of this sentence? Now, I might have just messed up right now, but anyway, y'all tell me what the significance of that sentence, well, before I butchered it up, what's the interesting thing about that sentence? That's right, every letter of the alphabet, kind of interesting, in a fairly short little sentence. And I announced that to the class, and some sharp-eyed student said, I think you're missing an S. And then, oh yeah, oops. So I think it was a misremembered there. Okay, so there we go. So that's a good one there. And so let's go ahead and copy and paste it and kind of sprinkle it around. So we'll just do a YY, just jump to various places, and let's just put plenty of quick brown fox sentences, if you will, into our file then. All right, maybe one up to the top then also. Oh, there was another one just for trivia, I guess. This goes way back. In fact, gosh, I do remember when I was a kid, and if you'd go into a store like Sears, all right, you go to Sears, or when I was little, Montgomery Ward, something like that, and you go to the business office or home office department where in later years they would sell PCs and so on when they had typewriters. And anyway, it was common that they would have shelves up about so high that you can stand in front of and try out the typewriters. As you can well imagine, typewriters were not real cheap, kind of complicated mechanical or electromechanical devices and so on. And if you're going to invest that kind of money, you want to make sure that it kind of has the right feel. Isn't that funny how a keyboard, doesn't a keyboard, are y'all kind of picky about how it should feel? Do you like them kind of mushy and kind of quiet or kind of clacky or whatever? We all have our preference, and it is what it is. We just like certain keyboards. Same thing with typewriters, of course. Anyway, so you'd go into the business area of those department stores, and they'd have typewriters set up with paper, and then you could type various things. And another little sentence that was commonly typed, and these days few students have ever heard it, but it's worth typing, I guess. How about, now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. So I remember that was another thing that, it was just something that you typed, perhaps learning in typing class, or when you're trying out a typewriter at Montgomery Ward's in 1980 or something like that, And I remember then, so I'm going to paste that throughout also then, just for grids. Again, don't worry about making yours look just like mine. And so I remember when I recalled that sentence and announced it to a class, and some students had heard of it, many had not. And I kind of wondered about the significance. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. Boy, doesn't that sound like it should have been like during the Revolutionary War or World War I or II or something else like that? But back then, at least I did a Google, and if I'm remembering correctly, it really didn't have any such grand, proud time as having come from a period like that. Instead, I think literally it was just something that somebody made up just for situations like this, just when you're practicing typing and so on. Hey, it's just a good little expression to type in, but it doesn't have an especially proud history, I guess, But there's another one kind of similar to the old quick brown fox things. All right, so now that we have typed in a bunch of stuff, and let's say we want to make some changes, and maybe we want to make those changes repeatedly. So what we're going to show you next is how to search, and once we know how to search, then we can also show you how to replace by learning I'll tell you what we'll do. The order doesn't really matter. Let's do change a word. So we'll just go to some random sentence here somewhere, and I might just pick one of the, just pick a sentence. I'm very excited to, tell you what, I'll change excited to happy, all right? So if you put your cursor at the beginning of a word, And the end of the word needs to have a space or a piece of punctuation at the end of it or something like that. You know, VI is kind of smart to be able to detect, you know, where the end of this word is, for instance. And so in our cheat sheet over here, now you can't quite see the whole thing because it got kind of covered up. But to change a word, we're going to use the CW command. So there is a VI command called CW. And again, the timing doesn't matter. So my cursor is on excited. If I type a C and then a W, when I type the W, it deletes that word and then puts me in insert mode. I can type my new word, such as happy, and then I'll go ahead and hit escape out of kind of habit, I guess. There you go. So I changed a word. So it deleted the current word, then put me into insert mode so I could type my replacement word, if you will. Hey, speaking of change word. Well, if, you know, isn't that interesting? CW did a delete word and then put you into insert mode. There's another command you can put down here, either with the deletes or down here with CW, one or the other. There's kind of a hybrid. And anyway, there's a command that's not on your cheat sheet, so write it in one of these locations. DW for delete word. All right, DW, that's kind of handy. And you know, again, Notepad that I know of at least doesn't have a delete word command, but it can be kind of handy. So check this out. I put my cursor here on that I in I am happy, and if I type DW, it gets rid of the word and the space that follows it. Check it out. There's my W. It got rid of the I and the word that followed it. And oh yeah, by the way, here's another another VI command. To repeat the last command, a period, a dot. We'll often call that a dot because it's easier to say than period. A dot will repeat the last command. My last command was delete word. So check this out. A period deletes the next word, and the next word, and the next word, even though they're different lengths and so on. So that's kind of handy. And again, it's a good thing that it also gets rid of the space afterwards, or otherwise we'd have a bunch of spaces kind of accumulating here. So DW is kind of a handy command also. And again, it's a little quicker perhaps, you know, than having to hit the delete key and hold it down or something like that. Okay, so we have repeated the last operation. We learned change word and delete word. So what we'll do now I want to search and then replace. Now the replacing I got down. I can do the replacing with the change word command, but we need to learn the search. So just for the heck of it, I'll put my cursor for now. We'll just manually roll the cursor up to the first line here somewhere. And let's say that I wanted to change the quick brown fox. I'll change it to quick brown cat. Okay, the quick brown cat. So I need to search for cat. So I'm going to make this easy by setting up a search command. So all right, make sure you're in command mode. And then we're going to type slash. Notice when I type slash, my cursor moved to the bottom. And we see a little slash down there on the bottom. So it kind of moves me down to the little status line, and I'm typing in what I want to search for. So I want to search for FOX. Now, why not? And it's funny, it goes ahead and also highlights. All right, here it found FOX up at the top. Now, my cursor is still down there in composing my little search string, if you will. But as soon as I hit enter, it's going to move my cursor to that first occurrence of fox. And there it is. And oh yes, on search for a string, note that, where's the darn thing? I can't quite see it. Here we go. N repeats the current search. So I'm searching for fox, N for next, N for next, N for next, N for next. So that's kind of cool. So that's how you can search for something. You set up your search with the slash command. Then you repeat the search with N. And now let's set up a CW command. All right. So I have my cursor on the word fox. CW, it deletes that word, puts me in insert mode, CAT, escape. So now N for next takes me to the next occurrence of fox. I hit a period to repeat that change word command. And an N to go to the next fox, and a period to replace that word again. N for next. Oh, I want to leave that one for whatever random reason, so I'll skip it. But N again, I'm going to change that one, so period. N for next, and period, and so on. So anyway, you can N period, N period, N period, and go through your file pretty quickly, changing occurrences of one thing to something else. Now, what if you wanted to change a whole bunch of them all at once with just a single command? Is there a way to do that? There absolutely is. I'll show that to you soon, but not today. Okay, but for right now, we'll just set up a search command, set up a change word command, and we'll just N period, N period, N period, and work our way through. And that's pretty good. All right, we're doing just fine here. Let's see what's left on the old cheat sheet. Okay, how about, yeah, gosh, this here, display the current line number. It's really kind of, with our current version of Vim, I did an OS update. Gosh, I think we talked about uptime on this server. I had this darn server up for 3 years and 8 months without a reboot. And then someone went and powered the dang thing down in August. And I did an operating system update in August. And when I did, I upgraded lots of different things. Anything that was out of date, bring it on. I upgraded everything then. And when I did so, VI got updated, or Vim got updated. And when I did, a new feature was included in Vim. And that new feature is this thing over here. Old, regular VI and the older version of the previous version of Vim did not display the current line and column number on the bottom of the screen down on that status row. So you didn't know necessarily what line number you were on. Anyway, one way you could find out what line number you're on was to do a Control-G. And anyway, used to Control-G would say you're on line number 41 of 46. So it used to say, here's the file. It's been modified. It is a new file. It hasn't been saved yet. And it used to say, you're on line number 41 of 46. In other words, you are 89% of the way through the file. But for whatever reason, they updated Vim. And now it tells you the current line number always, just down there on the bottom. So Control-G is not as important as it used to be. So I might get rid of it. But to be clear, if you end up working on a system with just regular old VI or an older version of Vim or something, they might not tell you what line number you're on, and you could get it very easily just by typing Control-G. All right, let's see, others. All right, so I've got a file. It's not real big. Gosh, it's only 46 lines. It's hardly big enough. Hey, tell you what let's do here. I'm going to make my file bigger. So I'm going to go to the top. You guys can just scroll up to the top or whatever. And I do know from Control-G that my text file is 46 lines. So I'm going to say 46YY, and I'm going to paste it up above and paste it up above and paste it up above with a capital P, a capital P, and a capital P. And now, good grief, now my file is 184 lines. So do something kind of similar. So I yanked the entire file, and then I pasted it with a capital P multiple times, and then the rest of it kept getting pushed further and further down, so that now we can practice paging up and paging down and so on, and having a file of a decent length. All right, so we'll talk about page up and down. And, to be clear, do the page up and page down keys work? They do, all right? But if you want, you can also use, here we go, Control-F and Control-B for forwards, in other words down, and backwards, in other words up, all right? And they work just fine. So check this out. Control-F, and we're moving down, and Control-B, and we're moving back up. And there you go. And over to the right, you can add a note. These aren't on your sheet, but over to the right of Control-F and Control-B, there's another version that's kind of similar, and it's Control-U and Control-D. I wonder what U and D might stand for. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Think I can guess. All right. Up and down, perhaps. Now, they're not exactly the same. And to be honest, I don't remember which is which, but we'll just do a scientific test here. For the purpose of science, we're going to test it out. So check it out. My cursor is currently on line 1. And when I do a Control-F, it's on line 27. Okay? So there's that. Let's go back up to line 1. And now I'm going to do a Control-D. I'm going to go from line 1 to line 17. So anyway, there's kind of different granularity. Control-F moved us 27 lines down. I think it's one screen full. And Control-D moved us down 17 lines. So they're just about interchangeable, but one moves a little more than the other, I guess. Okay, I've been using this command a number of times, and you might have kind of seen me do it. Finally, here it is. It is in your cheat sheet. To move the cursor. Man, this is a good command here. This is a very good command. Very important. And especially, imagine if you're editing a file with Notepad. Oh, Notepad would be really bad. It would be very bad when you think about this. So in the real world, programs can get kind of big. In the real world, programs can get kind of big. And imagine if you're editing a file and you send it to the compiler, and the compiler says, you have a syntax error on line 273. Okay, got a syntax error on line 273. And if you're in Notepad Okay, everybody be quiet here real quick because I got to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, that's a lot of counting to get to line 273. And Notepad, to my knowledge, you can't turn on line numbers. Hey, check this out. It's not on your sheet, but just for the heck of it, make sure you're in command mode. Here's talk about a 2-line command or a 1-line or a 2-character command or a 1-character command. Check this command out. Make sure you're in command mode. : set space number. So that is a multi-character command in VI. Enter. Oh, now if I have a syntax error on line whatever, then I can arrow down and find it, of course. So that's kind of cool, perhaps, Now, it takes a few characters on your screen. It kind of bumps everything over. You have a little less room on your screen for other things, before you're going to get word wrap around. Oh, here we can see real clearly, for instance. Check this out. So, yada, 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 yada. Watch it. Check that out. See, when it wrapped around, well, this is still part of line 11, and we can clearly see it here with line numbers turned on, for instance. I'm going to go and delete that part that wrapped around. Anyway, : set space no number. Okay, to turn line numbers back off. Or when you get out of the editor and come back in, line numbers are going to be turned off by default. Can you have it where it turns line numbers in automatically every time when you enter? You certainly can. We can show you how to do that later then also. But anyway, so you can imagine if you are compiling your program and it says I have a syntax error on line 43 or whatever. If you're in Notepad, there's no line numbers. And you don't have a way to tell it to skip to a particular line number. Well, the good news, we've just seen in VI, you can turn on line numbers if you want. And the other thing, this command here, you've seen me type at this point a couple of : commands. / was one that brought the cursor down to the bottom for search. : I typed : the cursor moved to the bottom also, and I typed set number or set no number to turn line numbers on and off. Here's another : command. Check this out. Uh-oh, I've got a syntax error on line 43, so I command mode : 43, pops it down here at the bottom, : 43. When I hit enter, poof, I'm on line 43. That will be very handy because you will be compiling your program and the compiler will tell you you have a syntax error on this particular line number. Then you need to go into the editor and jump to that line number and take a good look at it and fix what's wrong with it. So boy, this would be one, if you had a highlighter, this would be one of, gosh, a number of them, of course. But this kind of a small little command that you think is kind of almost insignificant, but as a programmer, where you will be getting syntax errors on random line numbers throughout a decent sized file, boy, it sure is nice to be able to jump right to it in the editor without having to lean on the arrow key and go searching for it or whatever, We're getting close to the end, you guys. We're getting close to the end. We're doing fine on time. Down to the bottom, one thing we haven't done so far is that we still haven't saved this file. And to be clear, when I'm editing this file, which I did here, I just started with a brand new file that I created, and these edits are just made in memory. Nothing has been saved to disk. We think of a file as residing on a disk. Yeah, when you save it. And back in the day, Notepad, the same way, is if you didn't save it and you lose power or whatever, those edits are lost. I've noticed just recently that for some random reason I do use Notepad just to save little notes and so on what I'm doing on a given day and so on. I don't really need a full-fledged word processor, so I just type them into a text file. Fairly recently, Notepad has started auto-saving. Okay, it is what it is, But you can turn on journaling where it kind of auto-saves in the background, if you will, and that way there, if you lose power, you can restore from the last version that you had and so on. But I have VI kind of configured to behave in a fairly crude manner like real VI, where it doesn't do journaling or auto-saving or anything else like that. So to be clear, it would be a good idea every once in a while to go ahead and save your file just to make sure it does get saved in case you lose power, especially if the lightning is going outside and the thunder is really loud and you're worried about losing power. You might save your file every once in a while because you're at risk of losing it. So let's show you how to do just that. Our first save a file command, it's another one of those : commands, : W. W stands for write. I'm going to write this thing to disk. You're in command mode, : W, enter. Look what we get down there at the bottom. My first file. It was a new file, but I just saved it. It's 184 lines. Boy, we've been busy today. 7,764 B for bytes written. All right, so of course copy and paste kind of certainly helps on getting that volume up there then a little bit. So W for write, and then the next one down, WQ for write and then quit the editor, exit the editor. So colon, WQ, enter, we're done. All right. So it did write it to disk, and then it got me out of the editor. That worked perfectly fine. Back in we go. I'll just hit the old up arrow to do the old command line editing. And, all right, so I'm back in the editor. And so the next one on our little list down here is colon Q. So W stands for write, Q stands for quit, quit the editor. So colon Q, quit you out of the editor without saving, okay? Back in the editor we go. Now one thing, so you know we mentioned before, we were talking about the copy command and the move command and so on, that hey, you don't get any warning. If you clobber a file by copying a file on top of it or something like that, Unix is not going to ask you, are you sure you want to do this? Nothing like that. And instead, it's just going to do it. And but VI, it actually will give you, or this version of VI will give you a little bit of a warning if you're going to abandon or quit the editor and abandon some edits you have made. So let's make a change here real quick. So I'll delete a line, for instance. And now when I type colon Q, it can't pop up a message box, but it does the next best thing. Look down at the bottom here. It's telling me, hello, you have not written this thing out since we've made a change. We've made a change, but we haven't saved it. Are you sure you want to abandon this file, losing those updates? And then it tells you, add an exclamation point to override, add an exclamation point to show it that you really mean it. So I have that on the cheat sheet down here. If you really, really mean it and you're actually quitting and you have made changes, then to get past this little warning, you're going to have to stick an exclamation point. I want to quit this editor and I really mean it. Colon Q bang. We would often refer to the exclamation point as a bang. I think that comes from the old comic strips and so on. Bang, pow, you know, when Superman and so on are having fights or whatever. Anyway, so bang, and we get out of the editor even though I've made some changes. All right, how you guys doing? Still hanging with me? Okay, let's see. We're doing fine on time. So let's take a breath here for just a second, and then we'll go in. I'm going to show you some extra ways to save the editor. So these are all fine. You know, of these, you know, I'll certainly will use colon Q and colon Q bang. And, you know, it's not a bad idea to every once in a while write out what you have. But, you know, the honest truth is what we're going to really stress when we're writing programs is write a few lines of code, exit the editor, compile it up, and then test it out and see if it works correct, and then come back and add some more. So, you know, I encourage you to not sit down and type in the entire program from start to finish in one big monolithic effort where you might want to do a colon W every once in a while in case a lightning bolt hits the house or whatever, you know. So I'm going to say, this isn't so necessary these days, you know, especially if you're just writing 10 or 20 lines and then you're going to exit and compile and run and then kind of repeat that process. But these are good, you know, when you want to abandon your file and not save it, you know. But there's another way. Oh, that's right. So I got to do this, and I got to turn the volume up, and I better turn on system audio up here in the recorder. And to show you the other way to, oh, that's right. There's two other ways. We'll come back to this in just a second here. So come back to you in a sec. Let's go here. So another thing to add on to your cheat sheet down here, another way to exit the editor. So check this out. I'm going to type ls-l. My first file, the modification time is 1032. 1032. So the date, of course, is now 1036. So, all right, the file's 4 minutes old. So if I go into VI and I'm just looking around, okay, everything's fine. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I could type colon Q would work. And just get out. I haven't made any changes. That would work. Colon WQ would work, but what's the downside of colon WQ? It's going to update that modification time. It's going to update the file modification time. One thing to think about, you know, imagine if we had a lab that was due at the beginning of class today. Now, generally, if we have a lab that's due in the morning, I'm going to have it due early in the morning, 6, 7 o'clock, and then I can grade it and have it graded before I come to class. But let's say we had a lab due at 7 a.m. this morning, but I got tied up and I didn't get it graded, and it still wasn't graded, and I'm going to have to grade it this afternoon. Well, what you don't want to do, if that's the case, is, hey, I'm just going to look in my program and just take a peek at it there because I was just trying to remember how I did something or whatever, you know. And if you do that during the day, and out of habit you type colon WQ, you've just updated the modification time in that file. And then when I grade your lab, especially if you do that during class, at break, your neighbor says, how did you solve this particular part here? And you pull it up during break, and then you save it back with a :WQ, updating the modification time. And then that afternoon when I grade your lab, I'm going to look, that darn student, the nerve of them, they were working on their lab during class today. Because the modification time is going to be flat in the middle of the class period, and then I'm going to take off points for that. That lab is late, all right? I didn't get it graded at the deadline, but, because if I had, your modifications you tried to sneak in there, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so. You did have the opportunity, but guess what? I'm taking off points because you're working on this after the deadline and during my class, okay? So you don't want to get in the habit of doing :WQ. Don't get in the habit of doing :WQ. So a good thing to do is, okay, I'm looking around, everything's fine. Just get in the habit. This command will work fine. Another command that's not on your cheat sheet, :X. X obviously stands for exit, but the nice thing about it with :X, see the date as well at this point is probably 1038 or 9 or something like that. But when you exit with :X, I looked in the file, I did a :X, it didn't save it. Why didn't it save it? Because I hadn't made any changes, okay? On the other hand, if I go in and I delete a single character and then :X, now when I look at the modification time in that file, sure enough, now it got updated. So :X is a smart exit. It saves the file to disk if there have been any changes made. If there have been no changes made, it just bails out with no writing to disk. So that would be a good one. All right, so one other one, and this other one is actually the command that I use to exit the editor out of habit then. So for it, we have to show you a video. All right, hang on, we got to get there. Let's see, is that here and here? And all right. Sharp-dressed man. Oh, man. Okay, hang on a sec. Give me 2. Okay, gotta do that. Gotta do this. All right, that's good enough. Okay, turn up the volume. Got record on. All right, so we'll take a break here, listen to a little. Well, that's the question. What's the name of this group? High quality. Zach? ZZ Top. All right. ZZ Top, Sharp Dress Band, one of their. That was the best little rock and roll band from Texas, was kind of their nickname or whatever. And it's been a couple of summers ago. I like that song and others of theirs. They were never my favorite group or whatever, but I do remember hearing that bunch of old guys, of course, with big gray beards and so on, of the lead guitar and singer and so on. But I did hear that a famous drummer that played for ZZ Top died like 2 summers ago, something like that. But anyway, so ZZ Top, add that to your list. Well, capital ZZ at least, all right? So that's an alternative to :X. Capital ZZ is a sharp exit. This is a smart exit, I should say. I had Sharp Dress Man still on my mind, I guess. Now, one thing I need to mention related to that. So we go into VI, we're looking around or whatever. Maybe I do go ahead and make a change. And escape, capital Z, boom, and then sure enough, it has been updated as of right now. So it works just exactly like :X, but for whatever reason I like capital ZZ better. But one thing you have to know about. All right, so back in the day, if you're working not with a windowing environment, but instead maybe you just had a console of some kind where you could only be logged in once. But what if you wanted to run a program but you wanted to kind of set it aside and do something else for a minute and then bring it back? So anyway, so Unix does provide for multiple users always at the same time. Now if you have a windowing environment, you could log in multiple times to the server at the same time and so on. But if you have just one of those old school consoles that you're sitting in front of, a CRT, and you can only log in once, what if you got a program running, but you needed to do something else real quick? And you didn't want to Control-C and kill that program because it's almost done. So you just wanted to temporarily set it aside. So it gave you the ability to kind of just set this program that's currently connected to my terminal, set it aside. I can do something else and then bring it back. And that's called job control. Job control allows you to set aside a running program, a process, get your command line back, and then bring that thing back. And unfortunately, the keystroke sequence that you would use to take the current running job and suspend it in the background is Control Z. Now, you can add it to your notes if you want. You could use it if you want, but I'm just mentioning it because Control Z on the old keyboard is pretty close to capital Z, right? The control and the shift are right close to each other. And I will have students every once in a while that will get some weird results in VI because they're editing a file. And let's say, okay, here we go. Oh, yeah, here's another. So, let me turn the volume back down. So, capital D deletes to the end of the line. DD deletes the current line, and G, oh, that's right, here's another command I haven't shown you just yet. Check this out. Put your cursor anywhere in the file. Add this to your cheat sheet in terms of cursor control. So down here with the Control F and the Control B and so on. This is kind of a handy one. I'll just have you figure it out. Put your cursor somewhere in the file, type capital G, and tell me what happens. It moves your cursor where? To the end. Okay, well, that's exactly right. So that's kind of cool, and I'll use that command a bunch. Hey, what I've got looks good. I'm going to go to the bottom and start adding some more. I pull in a VI, capital G, pow, I'm down to the bottom. You know, so that's kind of cool. An alternative, I'm trying to remember in Windows, is it Control End or Control Shift End or something? Kind of does the same thing. To be honest, I don't remember offhand. Maybe that's kind of handy. So we know about DD, and now we know about capital G. So check this out. I'm going to put my cursor at some place. So what would you think if capital G takes you to the bottom, DD deletes a line, what about D cap G? Kind of marry those two commands together. Deletes the line from here all the way to the bottom. That's another kind of handy thing. So D capital G, pow, current line and everything below it, gone. Okay. And anyway, so I deleted all this stuff, so the file is mostly empty. I've only got 13 lines in the file now, and I'm going to save that. Well, I'm going to save it, but I'm going to fat finger the keyboard, and instead of typing capital ZZ like I want to, which would actually save it, I'm going to type Control Z. Now look at that. Take a close look at the screen. I got a little extra stuff in here. You know, when I typed VI here and came back, I just got a cursor. When I typed VI here and came back, I just got a cursor. But here I was in VI, and I typed Control Z, and I got a blank line, and then this weird thing about stopped, VI, my first file. That process is still there. It's just been thrown into the background. It has been suspended, if you will. All right? So it's still there. And again, maybe you wanted to do that so I could just wonder. I was just wondering who was logged in. Okay, gosh, sure enough, everybody's. So now I want to go back. How do I resume that? Don't type VI again instead. So again, that was related to job control. That Control Z suspends a job, it stops it, it throws it into the background. And you can do that. I can start up another process and suspend it, and so I can do multiple ones. And then when it comes to bringing them back, you can type the command jobs. And it shows you all of the processes that you have stopped or suspended with a Control Z. And oh yeah, in this case, I've just got the one. And I want to bring it back into the foreground. Notice it told me if I had multiple ones of these, they would be numbered. Number 1, number 2, number 3, and so on. So I've only got the one. It is at number 1, if you will. So if I wanted to bring job number 1 that has been suspended back into the foreground, I type FG. Now, since there's only one, I don't have to do anything. But if there was more than one for some reason, I'd have to give it the job ID number, which is just number 1 in this case. But I think if I remember, if there's only one, you can blow off the number. We're going to verify that real quick. So bring that thing back to the foreground. There you go. Okay. And I'm back where I was, having just deleted all that stuff. Okay, there I go. Capital Z, Z. Oh, there we go. So we got that saved now. Okay. So there, if you accidentally type Control Z, you'll know it because you'll get this stopped jobs thing here. Or I guess I should scroll up. You get a blank line, then this little stopped job message. Just type FG. It brings it back into the foreground, and you're good. there's a couple more commands here real quick that we'll show you since we have time to do so, and then we'll call it good for today. Other than to give you your assignment then. We're going to give you a little homework assignment that you're going to complete using VI. And all right, so the next command, I need my little drawing tablet here. And we'll go to here, and here, and here. Okay. All right. That looks familiar from last week. Okay. Gosh, it's funny. I've been teaching for quite a few years now, and I've asked this question, well, regularly, not necessarily every time. Sometimes I remember to do it, sometimes not. But I'm asking this question. Boy, I've seen the answers to this question have changed pretty dramatically over the years that I've been teaching. But I'll ask anyway and see what I get as a response. I'm not expecting many people to respond affirmatively here, but I'll ask it anyway. So how many of y'all learned how to drive a car truck with a standard transmission? Hey, more than normal. So 2 or 3 is kind of, 1 or 2 is kind of the norm. We got 3 here. I had one semester about a year ago. I had a big fat 0, and that's just a reflection of fewer and fewer cars are even available these days with a standard transmission. Sports cars, which I've really never had. And back in the day, of course, you could get trucks with standard transmissions. Now I think the Tacoma, is the only one that's even available with a stick shift in it. And used to certainly the 1 ton and the 3/4 ton and the 1/2 ton trucks. They disappeared from the 1/2 tons, and then years later they disappeared from the 1 ton and 3/4 ton. And I've never really had a sports car. I've had a few what I lovingly call Econo crap boxes. All right, and it's just a junky little car that's real cheap, and it's cheap to buy and cheap to maintain, and it gets good gas mileage. And historically, a lot of times the cheapest ones of those, a Civic or something like that, would be available with a stick shift in it, But nowadays also, nope, there's no economy cars that have stick shifts in them anymore. So it's just a reflection of the times. But why do I even ask that question? Because for those few that have learned how to drive a car with a standard transmission, you remember that learning process, and it was kind of stressful. It was kind of stressful because you have to do several things with your limbs kind of at the same time. And if you don't do it right, you're going to kill it or something else like that, And I clearly remember when I learned to drive when I drove for the first time a car with a standard transmission, I had motorcycles of some kind from when I was a kid. And so with the motorcycles I had, you shifted gears. You had a gear shift you shifted with your left foot, and a clutch you had activated with your left hand. So I was familiar with clutching and gear shifting and so on, but I'd never done it with a car or a truck that you shift gears with the clutch with your foot and the gear shifter with your hand. I never had done that. But I do remember one day when me and my old dad, the memories, we got in the old truck to take a bunch of junk to the city dump. Oh, memories, going to the dump with Dad. And anyway, so it was out west of town on Arnott Road out there where it still is today. And I was 14. And I remember on the way back, after we dropped the stuff off of the dump, then he stopped. Back then it was just a dirt road. And he stopped and parked. He said, "You want to drive home?" And I was really surprised because my dad was kind of a stern man, and I was surprised because I was 14. At 15, you can get a hardship permit of some kind, and you can go through driver's ed and so on, and then you get your regular driver's license at 16. But anyway, I was only 14. I had nothing, but I of course jumped at the chance. Heck yeah. So anyway, we switched seats, and so he had me there just on that road out there in the county. I'd go back and forth a couple times, start and stop and make sure, and again, I kind of knew what to do, but I just never done it before. But I mean, I tell you, it was very stressful, and especially once we got down, we stopped at a traffic light. There's cars behind me, and the light turns green, and it's time to go, and you don't want to kill it, and that's something that is easy to do early on, And the funny, for those that have experienced that, and the weird thing is, you have to your mind has to consciously tell your limbs what to do. Easy on the clutch. Listen to the engine RPM. Feed in the gas. Not too much or too little of one or the other. And your brain is overloaded just consciously giving your limbs instructions on what to do. But the amazing thing is, thanks to the wonderful brain that God gave us, somehow, over time, that all of that complicated stuff that took all of your possible CPU power, to tell your limbs what to do, eventually becomes automatic. And I have no idea. How does that happen? We talk about muscle memory. Your muscles don't have memory, but how is it that your it appears that they do, and eventually some complicated tasks can be done with basically no conscious thought at all. And so it literally is the case that I have never not owned actually multiple vehicles with standard transmissions. And, so it certainly is the case that now you hop in the car and you're shifting gears and you got a big gulp in one hand and you're talking to your friend or wife or whatever, and you don't give it a thought. It happens automatically. How does that happen? I don't know. That'd be an interesting thing to read about, I guess. But related to that, how eventually you can just learn something that at first is kind of awkward, but eventually becomes automatic. So related to that, well, going back to this, the earliest keyboards didn't have arrow keys. Well, we've learned how to page up and page down with VI, but without those darn arrow keys, how do you just go left, right, up, down, one line at a time, one cursor position at a time, or whatever? Well, there's commands for that also that are built into VI that allow you to do those things using these keys, okay? And so I remember I was working for the university. I got married as a student, and I stayed around to wait for my wife to finish her degree, so I got a job full-time working as a programmer for the university. And I had the wonderful opportunity to share an office. There was 2 people in an office with a guy's name was Dave, and we all called him, and it was appropriately named, we called him, literally we referred to him as Super Dave. He was a little older than us, and I mean to tell you, his name was Dave Safford. He was a brilliant man. And I had the wonderful chance to share an office with Super Dave. And I was working on the server one time, editing a file, using VI, just like we've taught you here in class. And Dave came over and he says, Mark, notice that when you're moving the cursor around, you're using the arrow keys on the keyboard. And I was like, well, yeah, Dave, that's what they're there for. Yep, I'm moving the cursor using the arrow keys. That's exactly right, And he said, anyway, you don't have to use those arrow keys. Really? Anyway, he says, no, you don't. So in fact, back in those old keyboards that didn't actually have those keys, well, what they did have, all right, let me draw 4 keys here. All right, so here's 4 keys on the keyboard, conveniently located, on the old home row, right under, for the most part, your right hand. Most people are right-handed. The old H, J, K, and L keys on the keyboard. And I always have to think and make sure I get it right when I get to this point of the lecture and I start talking about these things, because this is the honest truth. If you ask me, hey, what is the VI command you can use to move the cursor up or down or left or right or whatever, I'd have to stop and think. Let me think about that. And then I would probably just picture myself moving the cursor down and see which finger I was activating at the time, or whatever, because it's just automatic. And I don't think, I need to hit this key down to move the cursor. It just happens just exactly, through that muscle memory thing. It is auto magic for me now. And anyway, J moves the cursor down, and K moves the cursor up, and H moves it left, and L moves it right. Now you have to be in command mode, of course. You have to be in command mode. But so this is an alternative. And good old Super Dave, he told me all those years ago, he says, hey, just force yourself for a day or two when you're doing cursor control, when you're moving the cursor around, instead of using the arrow keys, instead use these keys here. Okay, Dave. And there's one of those times where he knows more than I do. He says it's a good idea. Dadgummit, I'm going to try it. And in no time it all just became automatic. And so it's kind of cool. So this is what I use for cursor control instead of using the arrow keys, if you will. Now, it does have one disadvantage. And that one disadvantage is that happens automatically for me. It happens automatically that I use the J key to move down. But what can happen is I find myself in Microsoft Word and I want to move the cursor down. Oh crap, that didn't work. Hang on a sec. Let me get back with the program. And I'll sometimes type J's, or even worse, K's if I want to move up. So I will every once in a while type KKK, oops, and erase it back off when I'm trying to move the darn cursor up. It takes me about 3 keystrokes before I recognize that. And anyway, so no, that's not any kind of symbol. It's just oops, VI programming there kind of takes advantage of it. So I'll try to avoid that. But anyway, but those keystrokes are those shortcuts, if you will, pretty darn handy when you're using VI. All right. Oh, time for our assignment, and we'll pick a due date. Let me see. Do I want to mention the due date here on video? We'll just do this. Okay. So let me come here in our notes. So homework for today. All right. All right. So our VI lab. And I'll copy and paste the URL here for that next then. Okay, so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to type, I'm trying to remember on this, is it Unix Lab 3? I think it might be. It is. Okay. So here's that. Give me one real quick second here just to paste it over and make it nice and big where you guys can see it. We'll paste it as text and we'll make it nice and big. Okay. Oh, we'll try. Hey, there we go. So there's that. Okay, so there's that. So what this assignment is, okay. So it also, again, it's an assignment that I would assign to my Unix students in this class that I teach. It's specifically on Unix. So under your home directory, /Unix/lab3. So do, as always, pay attention to where the instructions tell you to put your lab. So it, like your lab 2, lab 2 was under Unix lab 2. Anyway, here we are. This is Unix lab 3. So under your Unix lab 3 directory, using VI, you're going to edit a file called README. All right, don't put your initials or anything on the end of it, just README. That's what my program that I'm going to use to grade this lab is going to look for, is a file just called README, no period on the end of it, just README. And then anyway, inside your README file, all right, make a couple of paragraphs about whatever the heck you want. Your life history, your academic goals, a good joke, whatever the heck that you want, you know. Now, you know, I recognize that some people more than others, I'm probably on the extreme end of this, but, you know, I'll let you know that I do like to hear about what your, you know, where you came from, maybe what high school you went to, what your goals for college and what your career goals are, you know. So I'd ask if you would to mention that there. But, you know, that said, don't give me anything that you don't want to share with me. If there are certain things you want to remain private, then do so. You can find other things to let me know about. But I do like, if possible, for you to at least let me know about your school goals and your career goals then also. Yeah, please include a description of your major and your educational goals, career goals, and so on. And, you know, hey, this is an exercise in using the editor. If you discover typos or spelling errors or whatever, then go ahead and fix those. And, oh yeah, one other thing. Keep all lines less than 80 characters. So as the cursor moves over towards the right-hand side, if it's going to wrap around on its own, nope, go ahead and chop it off by hitting the enter key and moving the cursor back to the beginning of the line. And then one other, there is a length requirement, 2,000 characters. In other words, 2,000 bytes. And of course, how do you know how many bytes the darn thing is? Well, once you get out of VI, ls-l on, you know, my first file. Oh, this one here, I chopped it way down. It's only 600 bytes right now. So here's 600 bytes, so it's roughly 3 times what this is. Okay, so it's, you know, a screen and a half or something like that. All right. Hey, one other thing we'll show you just for grins, and then we'll punt. So just as an FYI, and again, I'll offer this, and I looked, and it is available for you guys to run this program also. Now, let's see here. Oh, do I have this picture pulled up? I do not. But think about this little picture here. What was it like for these two guys to be working in this environment where they didn't have a traditional screen? They just had this, quote, paper console. Well, they would use some kind of a line editor. And just for grins, writing text editors and even, you know, like VI, which I have done a couple of different times, and writing a line editor, they're kind of a fun little programming challenge. And every once in a while I'll just do so to brush up on some cursor handling skills and so on, you know. And so I wrote my own version of a program called Edline. Edline, or something similar to it, used to be available on DOS and Unix and so on, but it is a line editor instead of a screen editor, so there's no cursor. And I made that available to you guys, so check this out. Edline, E-D-L-I-N. So this is my program. It's similar to the line editors of old, my first file. And I hit enter, and it gives me this little prompt here of sorts. So imagine yourself sitting in front of that paper console, like Ken Thompson. You type Edline in the name of a program, you hit enter, and then it prints out this stuff. Okay, my first file is the name of the file, it's this many bytes, it's this many lines, and then you get a little prompt. It's kind of like a command prompt. But I'm typing commands not into Bash, but into this Edline program that I wrote. And again, I made this available where it should work for you guys then also. It does require that the lines be 80 characters or less in length. So if you have any wraparound lines, you'll have to fix those before you'll go into Edline. But The thing is, I don't have a cursor. How can you edit a file without a cursor? Well, we'll show you here. And again, the funny thing is, a little backstory I'll tell you. So Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie, they were very productive working in this environment here, writing programs in assembly language, which is very brutal, using a line editor on this paper console, but still they could program circles around all of us just because they were geniuses. One of their fellow co-workers there at AT&T Bell Labs, his name was Brian Kernighan. I saw a video of him where he was teaching at a university. And he was talking about good old Ken Thompson and how brilliant Ken Thompson was and so on. And he talked about some neat little utility program that Ken Thompson wrote for, it actually was that grep command that I mentioned at the first of class today. And so about that program that Ken Thompson wrote. And for the heck of it then, Brian Kernighan, he assigned a program kind of similar to that to his students, to his programming students. And as he tells the story, he said, they have all these wonderful development environments and programming languages and so on that were well beyond anything that Ken Thompson had. And so as a result of those, you'd think they'd be able to knock it out very, very easy. But what he discovered was those students didn't do very well. And then anyway, so the funny little comment he made at the end of the video, he says, well, these students did have all of these other tools that Ken Thompson didn't have, but they had one big disadvantage. They weren't Ken Thompson. And that made the difference, you know. So the interesting thing is what you would learn as a programmer, being able to type quickly really isn't that important. It looks like a programmer just types all day, and they kind of do, but it's what you type and you know that makes the difference. I worked with one programmer that was a brilliant programmer, and he typed with 2 fingers. Couldn't type very fast, but still he was a brilliant programmer because there's more than just typing. So if you type H for help, here's the commands that we have. Oh, P will print some lines. I can give a line number range. For instance, I can say, okay, you specify the line numbers and then a command. I can say 1, 5 P. And check it out. It prints out lines 1 through 5. And imagine those just got printed out on that paper console. Oh, there's a command here called D. So I give a line number and then a D. So I'm going to delete that line that has editor on it. So I'm going to say 2D. And it deleted it. And now if I say 1, 5 P again, we'll notice that that editor line is now gone. Okay? And again, I don't have a cursor other than one at the very bottom, but this could be done on a paper console. It's just printing this stuff out, you know. And anyway, if I wanted to do a replace. So let's say here we go, on line number 3, I want to replace fox with cat. So we look up at the usage. Okay, replace a string in a line of text. So it's going to be line number 3, replace, let's see if I make this work, and it's going to be fox with cat. Let's see if that's going to work. Replaced fox with cat on line 1, and now if I say 1, 5 P, look at that, there you go. So again, we're not moving the cursor up and down the file, we're just typing things in at the bottom of the screen. It could just be printing out, you know, instead of just displaying on the screen, because no matter what, I'm not actually moving a cursor around. And then, oh yeah, what were my commands? How do I save this thing then? Oh yes, X will exit without saving, W will write it to disk. W, it wrote it to disk. Now when I exit, and it's done. So anyway, there you go. So if you wanted to see what it was like to be a programmer in Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie's day, then you can play around with Edline. And anyway, we showed you there. Oh, insert, if we go back in, if I say P for print, just by default it gives like 10 lines. If I wanted to do an insert at a given line number, let's say line number 8, insert, and then enter some stuff. All right, enter a dot at the start of a new line. I don't know what this is doing. Okay, one line inserted, and then P for paste. And hey, there you go, there's that junk. So anyway, it has an insert command, and also we can insert some stuff in the middle without moving your cursor up and actually typing it into place. And then W and X, and there we go. All right, you guys. Oh yeah, so for the due date for our VI lab, we're going to say that's due at 6 a.m. at the beginning of our next class period. So I can just do that and not have to mention a specific date so that I can use this video again if I ever needed to. So you guys know when we meet next. So we're just going to have it do the next class period, but at 6 a.m., 3 hours before we meet them, in other words. Questions on that? All right, my young friends, that is it. So you guys take off, and we'll see you in a bit. See you then.